Senator Merrick, you are recognized for debate.
Thank you, Mr. President. I appreciate all of the questions and debate related to this topic of what we should do here in Oklahoma concerning this sensitive issue of gender dysphoria and what we should do and how we should respond to what the DSM labels as a mental disorder. I believe it is a very serious issue we're seeing across our nation, and we should respond appropriately. I share the sentiments of my colleagues, the majority of the colleagues in this body, that to promote and help facilitate with taxpayer money the gender reassignment should be disallowed in this state. I think it reflects the majority of the opinions and values held in this state. And so I think that that action should be taken and taken swiftly. But I believe this discussion concerning this issue is founded on a false assumption that the way we accomplish this is by accepting federal money. I think that what is consistent with what I believe is the failed administration in the White House is a tendency to label certain things the opposite of what they actually are. The Inflation Reduction Act is exactly the opposite of that, and it helps facilitate and increase inflation. And the American Rescue Plan is exactly the opposite. This train called ARPA is taking our country more quickly over the cliff. And I believe that to accept any of these funds is to just throw more coal, more fuel on the fire, and help us accelerate more quickly over this cliff. So I'm opposed to accepting any federal funds in Oklahoma. I think we need to put a return to sender stamp on this check and send it back to Washington and say, we'll figure it out here in Oklahoma, but we're not going to add to the $30+ trillion of debt. Forbes magazine said over the next 10 years, we're expected to pay over $5 trillion of interest on our national debt. I personally when I ran for Congress a few years ago, said that I would love to set a budget to reduce our national debt. I believe it's a very significant issue in this country, and we as Oklahoma have an opportunity to say something about it and do something about it by rejecting this money, sending it back, not just taking everything that's offered to us with all of the strings and all of the hooks. Every single one of these projects we're going to vote on can be justified with good causes, with heartfelt emotion. But it doesn't make it right, and it doesn't serve the greater good of doing our part to save this country and emphasize our state sovereignty in the meantime. So I believe we need to have this conversation, and we need to have it again very quickly. I would ask that we call for another immediate special session to deal with this specific issue, to end this practice in Oklahoma, but not do it based on accepting federal money. Just simply as the legislative body representing Oklahoma to decide what will be allowed in this state and what will not be allowed. I find it very interesting that we are interjecting ourselves into this conversation about what hospitals can and cannot do. But a few months ago, we said, no, we cannot. We must stay out of this conversation about what hospitals can and cannot do concerning vaccinations. I believe that if any entity receives taxpayer money, then the legislative body has a right and a responsibility to speak to that entity and to offer direction. So I believe we do have a right and a responsibility to speak to facilities receiving taxpayer funds and saying there are certain things that we will allow and we will not allow. If you don't like it, reject taxpayer money and become fully private. But as long as you receive taxpayer money, we as the legislative body have a responsibility to offer direction and make certain requirements. So I would encourage this body to be consistent. And if you ran on reducing the size of government, to not grow government, then let's do just that. Let's stop growing government. Let's stop spending all of the money that's offered to us. We don't have to take it just because it's offered. There is a better way. I say we take the higher ground as a conservative state and take the conservative way. I will be voting no on this one for that reason and all of the other ARPA funding bills, because I reject the premise that it's okay to go ahead and increase the national debt and jeopardize this country even more. So at the same time, I do believe this particular issue is important and it must be addressed, and it must be addressed immediately. So I believe we do need another special session to do just that.